Imagine your mailman drops off a package, and minutes later, it's gone. I set up cameras thinking I'd catch a random thief. Instead, I uncovered a secret so dark, it tore my neighborhood apart. Packages vanished like smoke. First, it was a box of books, then a sweater, then a kitchen gadget. I'd ordered nothing too expensive, but enough to bother me enough to feel like someone was watching my porch, waiting for the delivery truck to pass and swooping in before I could grab it. At first, I blamed the usual porch pirates you read about, desperate strangers following delivery vans, circling like vultures. I complained to the courier service. They sent polite emails saying they would look into it, but weeks passed and more packages went missing. The refunds helped, but the unease stayed. I started rushing home from work, parking half crooked on the driveway, running to the door only to find nothing but empty steps and a faint smell of cardboard left behind by neighbors' packages still waiting, untouched. One Tuesday afternoon, I worked from home, laptop perched on the kitchen counter. Every sound of tires made me jump when I finally saw the delivery truck pull up. My heart picked up. I stayed by the window watching the uniformed man step out. He carried 2 boxes, one for me, one for next door. He set them down with practiced ease, waved at the neighbor's dog, and left. I waited only a minute, then opened the door and reached for my package, but it was gone. I froze, looking down at the empty step. Only the neighbor's box remained untouched, as if mine had evaporated. Panic bloomed in my chest. I spun around, scanning the yard. The street was quiet. No car, no bike, no stranger running away. Just silence. Only the faint echo of the truck rolling off into the distance. That night, I replayed the scene over and over. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the man had taken it back to the truck. But I remembered the sound, the weight of his boots on the porch, the package thudding against the wood, and yet gone. In less than 60 seconds, I told my best friend on the phone. She laughed nervously, said, maybe the delivery guy was stealing them himself, but I brushed it off too wild. Too risky, but in the dark when the house was silent, the thought returned, pressing heavy against my chest. If it wasn't strangers, then who was it? The next morning, I woke determined, no more shrugging. No more excuses. I ordered a new package, a simple kitchen timer. Not because I needed it, but because I needed bait. This time, I would be ready. Do you think the missing packages are the result of random porch pirates? Or is someone closer to home behind it? The bait was set. I clicked the order button and waited 2 days pacing the living room like a detective planning a sting operation. My friends teased me, said I was being dramatic, but they didn't feel the hollow pit of suspicion the way I did. Every time I saw an empty porch, I borrowed a small camera from my cousin. He used it for camping. Said it had night vision and motion sensors. I hid it inside a flower pot angled at the steps. So subtle, even I forgot it was there when I walked past. That morning, I worked from the couch laptop, opened coffee untouched, waiting for the sound of the delivery truck. Hours crawled by then, finally the familiar rumble outside. I rushed to the blinds, and there he was again, the mailman's same uniform, same tired stride. He bent down, placed the box right where he always did. I stayed perfectly still, counting my breaths. 5, 10, 15 minutes, nothing happened. The box just sat there, ordinary and harmless, like any other package. I was about to grab it, when a flicker of movement caught my eye. The footage later showed it clearer. A shadow sliding across the porch quick, and practiced a hand darting out the package, lifted, gone in seconds. But when I played it back frame by frame, my stomach tightened. Because it wasn't some hooded stranger in black or a teenager on a bike. It was someone familiar. The figure wore casual clothes, a baseball cap, and walked with the easy confidence of belonging to this neighborhood. I froze, fingers trembling over the keyboard, zooming in, but the face never lifted, just the tilt of a head and the swing of arms, and then they disappeared off camera as if swallowed by the street. My mind whirled through possibilities. Neighbors, delivery workers, kids playing pranks, but the smoothness, the precision felt different. Like this wasn't their first time. Like they knew exactly when to come and exactly what to take. I stared at the empty porch for hours, too afraid to bring the box inside, too paranoid to trust my own eyes when the neighbor across the street waved. I flinched like she had caught me doing something wrong, but she just went back to trimming her bushes, oblivious. That night, I downloaded the footage onto 3 drives. One for me, one hidden in my desk, and one I slid into a drawer at my office desk just in case something happened. Lying in bed, I kept seeing the shadow replaying over and over until the edges blurred into dreams. I woke before dawn, sweaty, heart pounding, whispering to myself that tomorrow I would go further. Tomorrow I would find out who it really was. The thief was close, too close. If you saw someone familiar shaped stealing your package but couldn't see their face, would you confront your neighbors or keep investigating quietly? Morning light streamed across the porch, but instead of calm, it felt like a spotlight on a stage. I was performing on every neighbor that walked their dog. Every jogger that passed made me twitch. I couldn't stop replaying the blurred shadow, the baseball cap, the quick hands lifting my package as if it belonged to them. I brewed coffee, but let it go cold, because my mind spun faster than my heartbeat. Someone in this neighborhood knew. My routines knew the mail schedule and knew I wasn't grabbing the packages right away. The obvious suspect circled back into my thoughts. The mailman himself. Maybe he left the boxes just long enough to look innocent, then doubled back out of uniform, but the idea felt slippery. Why risk your job for a kitchen timer or a sweater? Unless it was bigger than that, unless it was habit. Maybe even addiction. I decided to test it. I ordered 2 packages this time. One light, one heavy, then set up a second hidden camera tucked under the porch rail with a wider view. I angled the flower pot camera tighter so if someone leaned down, I'd see their face. This time, there would be no escape. When the truck came, I was ready, crouched behind the blinds like a hunter watching prey. The man in uniform stepped out, placed both packages side by side, and left nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. Minutes later, a shape appeared again. The same smooth walk, the same cap tugged low. My breath caught as they bent down, and this time the camera caught a flash of cheek-pale skin, lips pressed tight in concentration. Not enough for an ID, but enough to prove it wasn't just a random blur. The heavy package slowed them down. They gripped it awkwardly, then shifted and carried both off the porch, vanishing with the same practiced speed. I rushed outside the neighbor across the street, waved again. She was sweeping leaves. I waved back, forced a smile, and bent to tie my shoe, pretending to be casual. My porch felt hollow, like it had been robbed twice over once of things, once of safety. Back inside, I studied the footage again, pausing, zooming, memorizing the way the figure's shoulders hunched slightly, the way their right foot dragged just a little. I had seen that walk before I was sure of it. That night at dinner, I looked at every neighbor differently. The young couple with their new baby, the old man with his cane, the teenage boy with headphones who skateboarded past my house. They all had details, shoulders, caps, shoes, but nothing lined up perfectly yet. I wasn't ready to accuse. Not yet. I needed a bigger trap one. They couldn't slip through a box wired with a tracker. Maybe something bright that would tempt them. Something they couldn't resist, because whoever it was, they weren't just stealing packages anymore. They were stealing pieces of my trust. If you suspected the mailman or even a neighbor, would you confront them directly or set a bigger trap first? I ordered a brighter bait, an orange delivery box with fragile tape, inside a hidden GPS tracker, and a vibration sensor that would ping the moment someone moved it. I set it front and center on my porch like a neon sign that said, "Take me evening." Came my palms slick with nerves. I watched from darkened curtains when the mail truck arrived. The driver set the boxes down, waved, and left. I waited 2 minutes. Then the tracker whispered alive and moved fast across town. My heart dropped. I called a detective I found online. He agreed to help and warned me not to go alone that night. We drove toward the last ping. The river smelled like metal. The streets shone with rain. We parked and followed the signal through alleys until the tracker chirped again close by. Behind a dumpster, we found my box, half-hidden, tape ripped but closed. I brushed it with one finger, furious at the idea someone had been walking through my life like a thief. The signal led us on through backyards to a porch light, where a woman stood holding a mug hair and a messy bun. She looked ordinary, tired, wary. She glanced at the box, then at us. The detective said we traced a lost item. She blinked and said, "Oh, that box. I thought it was trash. I brought it inside by mistake and left it in the kitchen." She invited us in casual like neighbors sharing tea. Her living room smelled of lemon cleaner. Photos lined the mantel. Children at the beach, a man smiling in the background. For a beat, I felt calmer until the detective asked about deliveries and she fumbled words, then laughed too loudly, changing the subject the way someone hides a bruise. On a coat rack, I saw a baseball cap the same tilt as in my footage. My pulse quickened. My breath became small and the neighborhood felt like a room full of masks. I asked about the cap. She hesitated, then said, "My husband lost it weeks ago. He works nights and is always tired." The detective studied her face, then asked about recent visitors she named, friends and volunteers, and paused at the end, then added, "Oh, and the mailman sometimes drops off packages earlier, then leaves again." She talked like it was nothing. I felt dizzy because the story fit two pieces, the cap and the mailman's odd schedule, but something still misaligned. I thanked her and left the house with footage on my phone and a new fear settling like ice that whoever took my packages might be someone I passed every morning. I walked home thinking about the mailman, the woman's husband, maybe the teenager who mowed lawns, maybe someone else. I decided to set another trap, more public, a box with a visible camera and a neighbor on watch. I would force them into daylight. No more shadows, no more excuses, and I would wait. If the person who returned your box claims they thought it was trash, would you press them for details or set a public trap to catch them in the act? The next package wasn't meant to blend in. I wrapped it in bright red tape marked fragile in bold letters and placed it square in the middle of the porch where no one could mistake it. I mounted a small camera right above the doorframe and angled a second lens from the upstairs window, then texted my neighbor across the street to keep an eye out. She agreed, curious and a little too excited, like she had been waiting for me to involve her. The morning passed slow. Every sound felt amplified. A dog barking, a car door slamming, the low hum of the mail truck. At last I watched the man in uniform climb the steps. He nodded at the camera like he knew it was there, set the package down gently and walked away. Nothing strange, nothing unusual. Minutes stretched, long sweat on my palms, heartbeat in my ears. I crouched at the blinds waiting. Then the shadow appeared again. Smooth, calm, confident, the baseball cap pulled low. They bent, grabbed the box, lifted it with ease, and walked off down the street as if it belonged to them. But this time the footage caught everything. Their face turned slightly, the jawline sharp, the cheek familiar, too familiar. I gasped, stepping back from the window, whispering, "No, no, no," because it wasn't a stranger. It wasn't the mailman either. It was my neighbor's husband, the man I had just spoken to, the man who had smiled in photos above her fireplace. The tracker buzzed alive again, moving quick toward the same cluster of houses as before. The detective confirmed the signal on his laptop, then looked at me quietly like he already knew what I'd seen. I didn't confront anyone, not yet. Instead, I walked to my neighbor's porch with steady steps, asked if her husband was home. She said no, working late again. Her eyes tired, her smile brittle. I thanked her and walked away, but inside I burned with the knowledge that he was stealing not just from me, but from all of us. That night, the detective warned me to be careful. Sometimes theft is more than desperation. Sometimes it is compulsion or something darker. He told me we needed more proof before making any move because suspicion without evidence would tear the neighborhood apart. So I planned again a new trap, not only with trackers and cameras, but with bait that would force him to reveal more than quick hands, something heavy enough to slow him, something unique enough that he could not deny it when found. I lay in bed restless, the shadows on the ceiling, shifting like figures in motion. My neighborhood no longer safe, no longer quiet. It felt like everyone wore masks, and I was the only one pulling at the strings. The truth was closer now within reach, but I could feel danger tightening its grip around me. If you discovered your neighbor's husband was the thief, would you confront him immediately or gather more undeniable evidence first? The new trap was heavier, a sealed box stuffed with books so it looked valuable but weighed awkward in the arms. I tucked another tracker inside, one I could monitor live on my phone, then slid it onto the porch early before work so the thief would have more time to notice. The hours dragged, sunlight shifted across the floor while I checked the window again and again until finally the mail truck pulled up. The driver placed 2 normal packages plus my decoy, then rolled away. I whispered steady to myself and waited. Minutes later, the familiar shadow crossed my steps. The cap, the hunch, the same smooth rhythm of theft. He bent, lifted the box, struggled just slightly at the weight, then clutched it against his chest and disappeared down the sidewalk. I grabbed my phone and watched the red dot moving across town. My pulse raced. I followed from a distance, driving slow, heart hammering with every turn until the dot stopped near the river. Same cluster of houses, same block of peeling fences and dim lights. I parked far away and crept closer. Watching from behind a tree, the man dragged my heavy box into a shed tucked at the edge of his yard. He glanced around quick and nervous, then shoved it inside with other boxes stacked high. I filmed every second, my camera shaking from the cold and my nerves inside the shed. I glimpsed more cardboard towers of stolen packages taped and labeled from neighbors, addresses, a secret stash hidden in plain sight. When he left, I stepped closer, snapping photos of barcodes and names. Recognition hit me sharp. Those were packages from people I saw every morning at the mailbox. The old man, the young couple, the teenager's sneakers stacked in neat piles inside this thief's hidden treasure room. I wanted to storm in, expose him right there, but my gut warned me. Danger clung to the air. He had a way of moving like someone on edge, someone who might snap. If cornered, I retreated fast back to my car, my breath clouding the glass as I sat trembling. That night the detective came over. I showed him the footage, the photos, the tracker data. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw, said this was more than porch theft. This was systematic, deliberate, maybe even resale operation. He promised to start paperwork, but told me once again to stay out of it. But how could I? When every package vanished, felt like a piece of our trust stolen too. I couldn't walk past neighbors without thinking of the shed, without wondering if they'd ever get their lost things back. I sat by my window long after midnight, staring at the porch at the empty steps, whispering to myself that soon this would end. Soon the truth would come out, but deep down I knew the confrontation would be messy and dangerous, and I wasn't sure if I was ready. If you found a secret shed full of stolen packages, would you call the police immediately or confront the thief face to face? Sleep came in fragments that week, broken by the image of the shed stuffed with cardboard proof of my neighbor's trust, piled high in secret. I walked the block each morning, smiling weakly at faces that didn't know their stolen things, sat just a few doors away, my throat knotted with the weight of the secret. The detective promised action soon, but his pace felt slower than the thief's hands. I couldn't wait anymore, so I decided to bait him with something bigger, something personal. I placed a box on my porch wrapped in bright gold paper with my own name scrawled across the top. Inside, I put nothing but crumpled newspaper and a small dye pack. One squeeze would stain his hands bright red. I waited hidden behind curtains, watching the street breathe in and out until the figure appeared again, smooth, casual, cap low. He bent, lifted the gold box, a twitch of surprise at its weightlessness, then tucked it under his arm and walked away like always. I dialed the tracker app. Heart thundering, the red dot slid across the map toward his house again. I waited 10 minutes, then walked outside pretending to check my mailbox. My neighbor's wife waved from her porch. She looked tired, distracted, her eyes darting down the street as if expecting someone. The detective met me an hour later. We drove to the block again, careful, quiet. He parked 2 streets away and we crept toward the shed. But before we reached it, we heard voices, sharp, angry. The man stood in the yard waving his stained hands at his wife, who looked pale and cornered. The gold box lay on the ground, burst open, dye smeared across the grass like spilled paint. My stomach clenched because she saw us and her eyes filled with something between relief and dread. She called out to me, voice trembling, saying she was sorry that she hadn't known what he was doing, that the boxes just kept appearing and she was afraid to ask. The detective stepped forward, but the man noticed and froze, his face twisted with fury. Then fear, he shouted that it was just junk, just trash, that no one cared about anyway, but the dye in his skin glowed under the porchlight, proof painted into his own hands. For a moment, I thought he might run or fight or worse, but instead he slammed the shed door shut, locked it, and stormed inside his house, leaving us standing in the yard with the silence of neighbors beginning to peek out from their curtains. The detective whispered, "We had enough now, evidence, witnesses, proof," but he still looked uneasy, like the storm wasn't finished yet. He told me to stay back, not to go near them until the paperwork was done. I nodded, but inside I knew it wasn't over because the wife's eyes had told me something else, something hidden beneath her apology, a secret I hadn't uncovered yet, and it chilled me more than the theft itself. If you saw the thief's spouse looking both guilty and relieved, would you believe she was innocent or suspect she knew more than she admitted? The next morning, the neighborhood buzzed whispers at mailboxes' doors, opening and shutting faster than usual, eyes flicking toward the house with the shed. I pretended to water my plants, but I felt them watching me too, as if I had dragged the shadow out into daylight, and now no one could look away. The detective filed reports, promised arrests soon, but my mind kept circling back to the wife. Her trembling voice, her darting eyes, that strange mix of fear and apology. She carried guilt like a heavy coat, but was it the guilt of ignorance or of silence? I decided to test her. I walked over late afternoon carrying a basket of cookies. Like any neighbor might, her smile was stretched too thin when she opened the door. Dye still faint on the grass behind her, she invited me in quickly, almost desperately. Inside, the air smelled of lemon again, but sharper now, like she had been scrubbing too hard covering something. The photos still lined the mantel, yet I noticed a new detail. The edges of some frames were turned slightly inward, as if they had been moved hastily. We sat on her couch. She thanked me for the cookies, hands trembling around the plate. I asked softly if she was all right. She nodded, then shook her head, then finally whispered. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. He said it was just packages, just things people would never miss. Her eyes filled, but her voice hardened when she added, sometimes I think he liked the power, more than the stuff, the act of taking it right from under everyone's nose. I asked if she knew where the packages went. All of them she hesitated too long, then said, the shed. Of course, only the shed. But I caught the flicker in her eyes sideways toward the hallway, and I knew she was lying or hiding something. Before I left, she pressed the cookies back into my hands and whispered, be careful, you're too close now. He knows you're watching. He doesn't like being watched. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind rattled the windows like footsteps on the porch. Every creak felt like him outside waiting. I checked my locks 3 times and still lay awake, heart racing. By dawn, I decided I couldn't leave this to chance anymore. I texted the detective, told him about her slip about the hallway, about the way her eyes darted. He replied short and sharp, don't go back alone. But of course, I couldn't let it go. I ordered one more package, not bait this time, but a real order, something ordinary, a blanket I needed. I left it on the porch untouched, watching, waiting. Not for the thief this time, but for her, the wife, because something told me she was more tangled in this web than anyone realized. If the spouse of a thief warned you to stop digging, would you take her words as fear for your safety or as a hidden threat? The blanket sat on the porch untouched, all morning sunlight warming its corners, while I pretended to work from the kitchen table, my nerves frayed with every tick of the clock, waiting not for the thief in the cap, but for her, the wife, whose words had sunk like hooks into me. By noon, she appeared carrying her recycling bin down the driveway. She glanced at the blanket, then at my window. Her eyes lingered too long. I held my breath behind the blinds and watched her move past, but the air felt charged, like she had left something unsaid. Later that evening, when the street dimmed and porch lights flickered on, I saw her again walking quickly across her yard toward mine. She looked over her shoulder once, twice, then bent to lift the box, her small frame struggling against the weight of nothing more than a folded blanket. She carried it not to her shed, but into her own house, the door clicking shut behind her. My pulse roared in my ears. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and crept outside, the grass cool under my feet. I reached her porch just as voices inside rose sharp and jagged, her husband shouting, "Why did you take that one?" Her voice trembling because she was watching me, because she's getting too close. Silence crashed down, then the sound of something heavy striking the floor. My stomach twisted. I wanted to run, but the detective's words echoed. "Don't go back alone." So I forced myself away, back across the street, shaking as I slipped into my own door. I played the recording again, her confession clear, her guilt not ignorance but complicity. She had been helping him, covering him, maybe even directing him. Her fear wasn't of him getting caught, it was of me uncovering the truth. The detective came the next morning. I showed him the video. His jaw tightened. He said, "This changes things. It isn't just theft anymore. It's conspiracy, and it's dangerous." He promised warrants, soon arrests even, but he warned me again to keep my distance until then. But distance felt impossible. Every time I looked out my window, I saw their house, the shed looming, the porch light glowing like a watchful eye, and I knew they saw me too. That night, a knock rattled my door. I froze, breath locked in my throat. I peered through the peephole and saw nothing but an envelope resting on the step, inside a single note written in rushed block letters, "Stop watching or lose more than packages." My hands shook as I read it, the shadows in my house growing taller and darker. I realized then this was no longer about stolen goods. It was about control, intimidation, silence. And I was the only one who could decide whether to back down or push forward into the danger. If you received a direct threat after uncovering the truth, would you back off for safety or keep pushing until justice was done? The note sat heavy in my hands like a stone thrown through glass. My instincts screamed to hide, to lock every door and shutter every window, but another voice louder, steadier, told me that fear was exactly what they wanted. I wasn't ready to give it to them. I called the detective, sent him a photo of the note. He said stay inside. Patrols would pass more often, but his tone carried doubt, like he knew they might strike before help arrived. I stared at my porch where so many packages had vanished and decided to turn their game against them. One last time, I set another box out. This one fitted with a tracker, 2 hidden cameras, and a timed alert that would buzz the detective the moment it moved. I placed it carefully in the middle of the step, then sat in the dark, with my phone clenched tight, waiting for the signal. Hours passed, the street quiet except for the occasional bark of a dog. Then at last, movement. A shadow crept across the porch, but it wasn't the husband this time, it was her, the wife. Hood pulled low, hands quick and desperate. She lifted the box and carried it toward the shed, unaware of the cameras catching every second. My phone buzzed, the tracker alive. The detective alerted. I followed at a distance, filming as she slipped inside the shed, where stacks of packages loomed higher than I had ever seen. She tore open the box, eyes wild, but instead of goods, she found the blinking light of the tracker and the red glow of the hidden lens. She froze, then cursed under her breath. Too late, the detective and 2 officers were already in the yard, their flashlights slicing through the dark. Her husband stumbled out the back door trying to run, but was caught quickly pressed against the wall. Dye still faint on his hands from before I washed from the sidewalk. Heart pounding as the officers pulled box after box from the shed, neighbors gathered in clusters, whispering, gasping, pointing. Some recognizing their own names, scrawled on the labels, others shaking heads in disbelief. The wife didn't look at me as she was led away, but her words from days before echoed in my mind. "Be careful, you're too close." Now, I understood she hadn't been warning me. She had been warning herself, because she knew eventually the truth would surface and she would be dragged into the light beside him. When the last cruiser pulled away and silence returned, the neighborhood felt different, smaller somehow. The porch that once felt cursed now glowed beneath the street lamp, ordinary again, but I knew I would never see it the same. The next morning, a package arrived, a real one, a replacement for something I'd lost weeks before. I picked it up, with steady hands holding it close, not because of what was inside, but because I had earned it back. Not just the delivery, but the trust, the right to feel safe in my own home again. I was just one woman who set a trap, but in the end, I caught more than a thief. I caught the truth. Did the ending surprise you? Did you expect the wife to be just a bystander or fully part of the scheme all along?